a little bit about our guests this morning with the North Star Alliance and Migrant Justice Community. First, we'll be hearing from Betty Preuss, who's a volunteer with the Interfaith Committee for Migrant Justice here in the Twin Ports. So she'll be giving us an update on their efforts. And note that UUCD has an interest group focusing on these issues. They'll be meeting next week. I'll remind you again of that. We also have with us Karen Wills, who is the Legislative and Policy Team Chair for the Immigrant Defense Network and North Star Alliance, which represent over 40 immigrant-led, immigrant-serving, multi-faith and social justice organizations in solidarity with Minnesota migrant, asylee, and refugees communities. So you may remember Karen, who was here with us last year for some Moose Jaw presentations and conversations. So we're really glad to have her back. I am just going to go ahead and turn it over to Betty. I'm also going to get the North Star Alliance slides up.
Hello, Duluth. Hi. Hello, Joanne. Thank you for being here. So yeah, I'm Karen, and the last time that I was here with your congregation was back in September. It hadn't even snowed yet, and we were working on getting out the vote. We sent scads. The vote sent 70,000 postcards to young renters across Minnesota to try to boost the vote. And we did good in Minnesota because what we saw many other places across the country was that there was, phenomenal drop off in the anti-authoritarian turnout. But here in Minnesota, we had people who stepped up and did turn out and did hold on to our state representatives who were more strongly pro-LGBTQ, LGBTQ, IAS2S+, who were strongly pro-choice, who were strongly pro-immigrant, pro-refugee. We did that. We came damn close, but we did it. And that, in this climate today, that kind of affirmation of a commitment in the state of Minnesota that we are going to remain a refuge state for the country as best we can for immigrants, asylees, refugees, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people, our two-spirit people, our lakes and rivers and salamanders and snails. We're going to do that, and we're going to do it together, and it's going to take all of us. So I am thrilled that Reverend Terry Bernor, who is the new executive director of Moose Jaw, is as a more passionate and committed about all of those kinds of things as I was when I was leading Moose Jaw, and had sort of given me the gold seal of approval to go ahead and be a volunteer now with Moose Jaw as well as with North Star Alliance and the Immigrant Defense Network, specifically in my lane, focused on immigration justice issues. So we will be making good trouble and doing things, and this is part of the launch to that. So what I want to do a little bit is, anchor some slides. I'm going to try to do that pretty quickly, tell you about the North Star Alliance and the Immigrant Defense Network, what those are and how we're working, and kind of, loop in Joanne and Betty around like, yeah, and where does Duluth come in specifically? But then also say, where do you come in? And when you go home into the community and you talk to 5 of your friends, where do they come in? Because none of us can do this without all of us, right? So, gonna just read, Meredith mentioned, and I just want to recap that, any press who may have come in late. This is off the record, not quotable. This is not a press time. This is a sacred time. We are in a sacred space, and we're holding that private. Okay. All right, let me see if I can, yay, advance slides. So, first of all, the political landscape, and we'll talk a little bit about the North Star Act and the North Star Alliance, talk about opportunities and commitments, and then I'm also going to talk about the new, brand new group that just started a couple months ago called the Immigrant Defense Network, of which the North Star Alliance overlaps. Think of you, if you remember from your math classes, a Venn diagram, two great big circles where there's a huge amount of overlap in the middle on this one. That's our alliance, and then the new IDN. And I'm policy chair for both of those because we're on the same page right now. My name is Karen Wills. My immigration story is that I come from people who are, if you can't tell, like from the total lack of melanin, Scots, Irish, and English. My parents were born in Boston. I'm a lifelong UU, by the way. I was born and raised, Harlem District Church, yay. And my grandparents sneaked across the border from Nova Scotia because they were in families with like 13 kids on a dirt farm. And the way to help take care of their families was to come to Massachusetts and work for rich people. My grandma was a housemaid, worked her way up to governess eventually. She was kind of bright. And my grandparents were coming down here to work in the factories and the mills. And they sent money back home and they paid taxes long before they had anything like a social security number. All right. So I think it's useful to start with that because one of the things that you can do with your neighbors when you start to hear slurs around immigrants, the phrase that you want to not use is, "We are all immigrants." We are not all immigrants. Some of us, if we use us in this broad, kind of UU way, I know you're not all UUs, but that's my roots and stuff. But if we use it in a broad kind of way, right? We are not, in fact, all immigrants. Some of us are legit, like we just came here from another country. We were born someplace else and came to this country, but some of us have been here for centuries. And there were indigenous people on these lands where we stand. There were Dakota and Anishinaabe people. There are Dakota and Anishinaabe people. And some of us were, or some of our brothers and sisters, hey Kathy, were dragged here, kidnapped and dragged here in chains, right? That is not an immigrant. That is someone whose ancestors were here. So we want to be careful about how using that phrase, "we are all immigrants," that can be actually landed super offensive. But the odds are pretty damn good that if you go back a generation or two, at least, all of us have an immigrant story. And I think being able to connect not only yourselves, but your neighbors with that immigrant story is super important. We learned when we were working on the marriage amendment back in 2012 that one of the ways to be able to reach people who are sort of immigrant hesitant is to narrow that gap. Bring it in. Think about who you love, who you have loved, who are your people, who are your circles. Look at where you overlap. So that if people are spouting this vile rhetoric, saying things like immigrants are a toxin in the blood of the nation, that's bullshit. You know how to push back against that, and you can bring yourself and your heart into it. Not just your head, but your heart. So the landscape right now, I don't need to tell you a lot about this. It is evil. Project 2025 and the current president's priorities include, as you've heard, mass deportations, expedited removals, which is like you get kicked out without any hearing, militarized law enforcement, so literally bringing the army to the borders and shutting down the borders so that the more that they get rid of the folks who can process legal immigration, the boost to people fleeing violence and fleeing starvation and fleeing the climate change that, hello, we're creating increases. And so we have people crossing illegally, and crossing illegally means more deaths. So it's a circle, right? We send guns, we pump oil, the world gets worse, people come here, we kick them out without a hearing, and so it goes. Right? So that's the Debbie Downer part for this morning. It is not good. There's an incredible amount also of racism and xenophobia going into this. People are not complaining a lot about Scots-Irish folk crossing the Canadian border anymore. If you sneak here from Nova Scotia, probably nobody's going to even notice. But and then the family separation, kids in cages, all of that kind of policy that we saw before. I'm going to take a deep breath now. Okay, let's all do that.
And there's
All right. So that's happening. We know the track record, the folks that are being appointed to deal with these things are it's going to look like it looked before, but worse. And when you look at the charts, there's a lot of talk about, well, Obama deported all these people, Biden deported all these people. That's not wrong. But you look at any chart of refugee admittances and illegal or unauthorized immigration deportations, and it's like 10 times higher in the previous Trump administration than it was in any recent administration proportionate to people who are crossing in. Okay. This is super dry, but there's always going to be somebody who's like a statistician or a math person or maybe even a college professor in the room. So you're going to want some numbers. And so I put this slide in here. The slides will be available. One of the, another argument for your, immigrant hesitant neighbors, the immigrant hostile neighbors, don't waste your time. You won't win that fight. But there's a lot of people out there who are immigrant hesitant. And those are the folks that we need to be talking to, those are the folks for whom we need to be the ambassadors, right? Those folks need to know that not only do we have like 500,000 people in Minnesota, at least 500,000 that we know about 20% of all of our kids. They're adding $1.5 billion to our state taxes every year, at least a couple billion. And that we have particular workforces. Everybody, the kind of images of California strawberry pickers come to mind, and that's a thing. If you like your strawberries in midwinter, that's where they're coming from. But only really about 7% of Minnesota's economy is agriculture. The piece of this that I think gets lost is that there is construction and roofing and hospitality, all the people working in hotels, people who are staffing the tourism. There are not enough people in the north to staff all the tourism industry. Healthcare professions, home health, assisted living, childcare in some areas. All of these are heavily immigrant staffed professions. In some cases, 30 to 40% of the workforce. So if indeed this, mass deportation, gonna catch them all like Pokemon kind of thing is gonna catch everybody, it will devastate Minnesotan businesses and our economy. So that is just not a good idea. Okay, North Star Alliance is a coalition of, I think some 70 some odd organizations, including, you see a little moose jaw thing up there, like upper left, that's us. And it started with a lot of faith-based groups, but has extended to the faith-based sector, healthcare, labor, social justice, and predominantly immigrant-serving, immigrant-led organizations. And that's our leadership. Our mission statement is to ensure that all Minnesotans can live our lives with the dignity, safety, and respect we all deserve through supporting legislation that protects immigrant communities from unrestricted federal overreach of local and state government. Yeah. We're working on one of those mission statements. It's like 3 words that you can memorize. But but basically, what this means is that for North Star Alliance, our focus as an alliance is on policy and legislation and advocacy. That's kind of what we do. We're not formally organized as a C4 or anything like that at this point, but we do policy. We are in coalition also with the Immigrant Defense Network, and the Immigrant Defense Network also has a policy chunk that overlaps us pretty much completely, and also is doing kind of direct mutual aid, direct sanctuary work, alliance, accompaniment work, food and all of these kinds of things. In addition, and they are also the folks who are doing the direct know your rights training and rapid responder training within immigrant communities in multiple languages. So what we've done now in Minnesota, this is a thing we do in Minnesota. We're famous for this in Minnesota. When we have a thing, we pull everybody in, right? So we've got this alliance that is now connecting almost every single immigrant serving organization in the state. Now, the North Star Act, I don't have my phone, so I'm kind of not tracking time as well as I probably should. So,
9:49.
Okay.
We have until 10:15.
Okay.
So
all right. Perfect. Thank you.
Make sure to allow time for questions.
Absolutely. Yes. I thought I was coming to the end of this part, and that is good. All right. We're on time. The North Star Act, this is an unreadable slide, so I'll just basically with the original North Star Act we brought into the legislature, and we met with about 50 people, legislators, about this last year. This is a specific bill that would it would basically require local police and sheriffs to do their job of like arresting people for crimes. And it would separate that out and sort of prohibit them from doing the job of federal ICE agents, which is to go arrest and detain and possibly deport people for alleged civil violations. People who are here unauthorized are not criminals. In fact, they have not committed a crime. In fact, they have committed a civil infraction by coming across the border without proper authorization. So what we don't want is for police and sheriffs who are not trained to tease out, who's an actual, they are trained to catch criminals. They are not trained to evaluate whether or not someone is here seeking asylum legitimately, or is in the process of getting papers and doesn't have them yet. That's a tricky thing to do, and they're not trained to do it. So we were looking for a law in Minnesota similar to what Illinois and Massachusetts and California and some other states have. There's actually 14 states that have similar laws now. New Jersey's another one, and really kind of tease that out. So just separate, just have our cops do their job and let ICE do their job, and not muddy, who's got what role. And I should say that in no way prevents any sheriff or policeman from legit, arresting someone who is, or detaining someone who is suspected of committing a crime. Okay. Right now, the political climate being what it is, there has been so much nasty rhetoric that we're not going to be passing the North Star Act this year. That's highly unlikely. That continues to be our long-term goal, but in the meantime, we are frankly playing defense at the moment, and we will be looking for opportunities to pass some pro-immigrant, immigrant supporting legislation. But the primary thing that we're going to be doing is, is we're trying to get everybody that we know to call your reps to block these bad bills. There will be more. There are 4 right now, but the big 3 are House File 10, House File 16, and House File 772. Those are, 10 is the one that is really filthy, because what it's doing is rolling back progress that we made in 2023. Minnesota in 2023 became one of the states that is including all of our non-citizen neighbors in eligibility for Minnesota care in our state. So if you're a low-income person, you can still get health care. So you are not going to school, going to work, and infecting your citizen neighbors with bird flu or whatever damn thing you happen to catch, right? So we want people to get healthcare so that our entire population stays healthy, right? We passed a law to say that, and they're trying to roll it back, right? So we have people in the state legislature now saying, no, if you're not a citizen, you are not eligible for any kind of public health services. We also passed a law that said that DACA youth, kids who were brought here, as 3-year-olds by parents who were fleeing violence or looking to feed their families, were eligible to apply for state tuition along with every other kid. They're trying to roll that back, right? And they're going like, blah, blah, we spent whatever it was, $80,000 on non-citizens to educate them. Well, yeah, because most immigrants, authorized or not, have been here for decades, will be here for decades. It can take decades to go through the process. And we want people to be educated, paying taxes, and contributing to our community of communities. 16 and 772 are both bills that would enact the opposite. They would make us like the same as Texas and Arizona. They would pass a law that said every single police or law enforcement officer in the state who even suspects that someone they interact with might not have authorized papers, might not have gone through the whole process of becoming a legal resident, we're going to report them. No matter how long they've been here, no matter whether or not they've committed a crime. Bad bill. Okay. I am going to skip through a little bit of our internal structure. We use that when people are on, just give you a sense. But just wrap up with, how can we help? What can we do? We do have teams that are working on, we have teams of lawyers who are working on legal language, research teams that kind of collect information about how other states have done it and where the threats are, where the opportunities are. We have our community organizing and direct action team, which is something where like Joanne and Betty here in Duluth and some of the organizations that are locally working in the communities have been super active and super helpful. We have a Greater Minnesota team, which is community organizing in, Greater Minnesota, outside the Twin Cities Metro. Policy advocacy, you will be getting a call from me sometime in the not too distant future saying, would you be willing to hop on a Zoom call and chat a bit with your own state senators and state representatives, because they need to have, supportive constituents, people who actually have the power to vote for them. Your power to vote for who you want to represent you is tremendous power, tremendous power. Your letters, your emails, your phone calls to those offices, federally and at the state level, and by the way, at your city council, county board, and school board, every single level, you want to get those people's names, they're all online, and put them in your speed dial and call them every single week or at least once a month. That is power. There's a wonderful organizer, Kathy Reinstar from Side with Love, who makes this analogy of honeybees. Talks about how a honeybee produces it's a teaspoon of honey or less in their entire lifetime. Every one of you is a honeybee. We're making this sweetness in the world together, right? It doesn't matter if all we can do is 1 teaspoon. Yeah, so contacting your reps, spreading the word, talking to your friends, talking to your community, donating, of course, we always do that. Sharing that information and just this advocating and making sure that the information that you get is good, solid information and not just disinformation or misinformation. So, okay, I want to check if